Students of Reddit, what's something your teacher did that really pissed off the whole class? Story 1. I had one of those teachers that just put a bunch of activities on the board and browsed something on their laptops all lesson. The worst part was it was a math teacher. The only thing she'd do was maybe tell us to shut up once or twice, apart from one time. Possibly after one of us had had a word with someone about how little she did, she suddenly snapped and sent the entire class outside until we were ready to do work. We all just laughed our asses off and browsed our phones. The ones who actually cared about algebra went back in until the teacher decided to come and check on us. She just stood there. We were all completely silent until I decided to break the silence. Nice of you to join us. Oh boy. Basically, after that, we compiled a doc of what she'd been doing so we could have a talk with the dean or something about what had been going on, but not before someone accidentally shared it with the teacher. And so for the last term she was with us, she actually improved. So yeah, that's my story. Story 2. Not a teacher, but the administration had all of us in middle school wear student IDs on a lanyard color-coded by what hallway our classes were in every single day. This sparked massive actual protests from the students, because even though my town is pretty low on crime rates, that administration, middle school and above, essentially treated every kid like they were either already a criminal or had strong potential to be. There were so many protests on the lanyard crap they stooped to doing it after winter break because it'd be bad publicity if they kept giving out detentions for insubordination the way they were. They also did things like assign seating at lunch and force the middle schoolers who wanted to go see the high school football games to be fenced in so as not to cause trouble. Note, wow, if there were no words like school and teacher here, this would actually feel like you're describing a jail. Story 3. Math teacher, general certificate of secondary education year. The teacher gave us a piece of coursework that we had about a month to do. We weren't the brightest bunnies at math in that particular class, just under average. But somehow every single student in that class decided we were going to go above and beyond to try and up our grades. We collectively pulled together and worked our ass off, some of us going without sleep at times so we could work on it and provide help to the others, myself included. When we handed in our coursework, there was a pretty good feeling in the class. We thought we had done well and we were pleased with ourselves. When we got our papers back, we all got higher grades than usual and in many cases did even better than we had hoped, myself included. Then the teacher informed us that the coursework was only mock and didn't count for anything. We now had to do the real coursework in the span of 2 weeks. There wasn't a riot. Everyone just went quiet. We were collectively stunned in disbelief and no one said anything at all. We just simply couldn't believe it. Over the next 2 weeks, I was pretty much crying every night. I'd burned myself out over the mock and was just too tired. I'd also been recently diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome, which didn't help my concentration or my mood at all. I wasn't the only one either. Everyone else was having issues and all the camaraderie we had built over the month previous just dissolved. Handed in my coursework after the fortnight was up and then we went and cried in the girls' toilets because I knew it was awful, especially compared to the mock I had been so proud of. The results from that were nearly all below our usual grades. I just about scraped my old average. The teacher then rubbed salt in the wound by saying she was disappointed in all of us. Just no one had the energy to argue. We just took it. I think one person tried complaining to the head teacher afterward, but nothing came of it. For extra injury, that teacher had several math classes, but we were the only ones she pulled that stunt on. Story 4. In the second semester of my first year of law school, everyone in my class, about 80 plus people, had to take a research class. This class was taught by 4 different law librarians, but followed the same syllabus. It was also worth 1 credit. These librarians ran the class as if it was 3 credits. We had to read, conduct legal research, and write 2 memos throughout the semester when we had 5 other classes, all within the 2 to 4 credit range, plus 1 specific class was notoriously difficult. Anyway, halfway through the semester, my class gets pissed at the workload to credit ratio, and someone starts a petition to reduce the number of assignments and/or change the grading for the class from a letter grade to pass-fail. Almost the entire class signs. There were a few holdouts. The student who started the petition delivers it to the librarians. The librarians remove 1 or 2 assignments but otherwise disregard the petition. Those who signed all awkwardly suffered through the rest of the semester. It's so annoying to get only 1 credit for a big class. Once a teacher said about a 1 credit class, quote, "Actually, this class should have more credits, but there just weren't any left when dividing the credits." It also happens that classes are 0 credits and you're still supposed to schedule to pass them. It's weird how the credits are divided. A study year is worth 60 credits, then the credits are just divided somehow over all the classes, no matter how many classes and how much workload there is. The weirdest thing that happened was when my major shared a common subject with a different major. We had different but overlapping majors, and this was one of the overlapping subjects. Because the other major had fewer subjects in total, this subject was worth more credits to them than to my major, because we all had to get 60 credits in a year, no matter the number of subjects and the workload. Story 5. The class was doing a project on criminal justice and held a mock trial. My friend got assigned to play the role of a sexual assault victim. In real life, she had actually been a victim of an assault that was very similar to that of the character. She felt that it would be too emotionally draining and tried to get out of the part. The teacher wanted an explanation, but my friend kept saying it was very personal. This went back and forth a few times over the next 2 days, and it was just not clicking in the teacher's head. Finally, he lost his patience and yelled out, "You're holding up this whole project for everyone. Why the hell is this so difficult for you?" With the whole class paying attention, she admitted she had been sexually assaulted the same way this character had and went to go cry. They changed the topic of the project after that, but the class never really looked at the teacher the same way again. Story 6. My German teacher would make you retake spelling tests until you got 100%. Once you did, you could sit and do whatever you like until the whole class got 100%. Now, this caused a lot of pressure on everyone as he used to belittle the students who didn't pass first or the second time. If you were the only one left, he would stand over you and watch you struggle. One test day, I decided to bunk off and I got caught. I burst into tears and explained how horrible this teacher was and that I'm never going back into his class. I was moved into a higher set German class with an amazing teacher and my German actually improved. Story 7. This was second year, maybe around 12th grade in school. My teacher, unable to manage 20 of these rowdy kids, is pretty enraged by the end of the class. She has a thing about counting every piece of equipment after class and she begins counting the Newton meters. Now, if you don't know what these are, they're literally metal springs with plastic around them that measure how much an item weighs. This teacher counted 19 when there were definitely 20. So she holds us back from lunch. She brings the faculty head in and we get a bollocking from her. Cannot steal from the school. Unjust. Yada, 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 yada. If we were rowdy before, we're raging now, and she requests the least well-behaved kids open their bags. Of course, these kids are protesting, but the teacher offers detention if they don't comply. So after rummaging through a bunch of pubescent kids' bags and finding nothing, she finally goes back to her desk to find the Newton meter sitting behind her world's best teacher mug. Look on her face? Priceless. Story 8. I'm super glad I got to tell this story. In high school, I had a teacher for pre-calculus who we'll call Dr. B. She was the worst experience I'd ever had with an educator, bar none. To this day, I still hate having taken that class. As a sophomore, I had never actually had a teacher who was credentialed to the point of having a doctorate. The only doctors I really knew about were medical doctors. So when I started this class, I often called her Miss B instead of Dr. B. Every time I used the wrong title when trying to speak with her caused her to ignore me completely. And not just me, but any student who did the same. As you can imagine, most kids had this problem initially. This led to an increasingly frustrating classroom environment to the point where no one liked her and only spoke if they absolutely had to. I tried to get better at using the proper title, but I would occasionally make a mistake. Everyone hated dealing with her, and some kids would do it on purpose just to annoy her. One day, I had to use a restroom, and I raised my hand to get her attention. She didn't see me at first, so I called her name. "Miss B, can I use the restroom?" This witch looked me dead in the eye and then turned back to what she was doing, completely ignoring me. I was so goddamn angry, I walked out and went to the restroom anyway. When I came back, she tried to write me up for leaving class. I just took the referral and tore it up, looking her dead in the eye. We had a bit of a standoff, you might say. A couple of my buddies were fighting to keep from laughing because I was never the rebellious type, so this was a treat for them. She let it go, so I figured that was that. When I got home, my mother asked me what happened. Turns out she called my mom about my discipline problem and said that we would have to accept a referral the following day. I told my mom what happened, and thankfully she understood. Most of my teachers love me, and I never had any problems, so this was not a normal situation. She said she'd take care of it. The next day, I get called down to the office after first period. When I arrive, my mom is there with Dr. B, the principal, and a couple of other administrators. She then proceeds to go into this crazy mom mode and basically tells them that any referrals written by this teacher would be ignored and she would not force me into any kind of in-school or out-of-school detentions. It was one of my favorite mom moments, and all I could think was, hell yeah! Things got a little better in class after that, but I still hated her and was happy when the year was over. Story 9. Screamed at the class because he assumed that an intermittent beeping sound that occurred throughout the lecture was somebody receiving text. It was a projector that he was using, alerting him to the fact that it was overheating. Dumbass. That's almost as good as a time a substitute tried to confiscate a student's phone when it beeped. It was a diabetes thing attached to the student's body. My other friend with an insulin pump tells people that she's bionic and that her batteries are low whenever someone questions the fact that she is beeping. The fuel she uses to recharge is usually a juice box. Story 10. She didn't believe in field trips because she said that kids would have too much fun and learning isn't supposed to be fun. However, the entire grade would take the trip, so she was required to take us. So she would make us all sit in a common area, the zoo, museum, etc., and she would hold classroom lessons. It was so upsetting to hear about all the cool things the other kids got to see while we had class. The fact that I still remember things I learned on fun field trips compared to the countless times I was in a classroom says a lot. Story 11. Numerous times they failed students at an exam, then publicly admitted that passing 40 to 50% of students that took the exam would be too much, and that's considered normal behavior. I absolutely hate this. There was a teacher at my old university who just so happened to be the father of one of my closest friends. I was very confused in the beginning when everyone hated him because to me, he seemed like a nice guy. I found out later he takes pride in failing his students and will actively fail anyone he feels isn't interested or putting in enough effort. One of my favorite professors said it best. If half of your students fail your class, you have failed as an educator for half of those students. Story 12. A 40-degree weather Celsius in outback Australia, and she would not turn on the aircon in class even though it worked. Her reason was that when she was young, she didn't have an aircon and she survived. All the students hated her. Story 13. Oh, this one's a favorite. Post-English class, break starts, and I remain at my desk and do the homework the teacher assigned. The break ends and the teacher comes back and sees I've done the homework already. She waits for the class to come back, then she shouts, "Since she has already done the homework, you all get 2 extra pages." Needless to say, that didn't improve my bullying situation. It was a middle school in Italy. I was 12 at the time, and it definitely was not a lot of homework. Don't remember how much, but probably around 5 pages of English grammar exercises. Fill in the gaps, turn adjectives into adverbs, etc. It was easy homework. Most pupils who liked the subject would be able to do it in a 15-minute break. But teachers and pupils bullied me terribly in that school. I do remember my parents telling me she was probably bitter because I could speak and understand English better than her. Which could have been the case, could have been not, I don't remember, but she surely didn't like me. Yelled at me for no reason, called me stupid, laughed when other kids bullied me, or actually got mad at me when I got bullied. It means you did something to piss them off. It's safe to say that this wasn't an actual thought through a pedagogic decision gone wrong. Story 14. The head teacher of my high school tried to expel me for having an epileptic seizure in front of him, said I was a danger and distraction to other pupils and was disrupting his school. I ended up being kept out of school for 2 months while my parents fought my case. At that time, almost all the rest of the teaching staff, who were furious with this decision, kept me supplied with work and even one-on-one mentoring when needed. This was in a rural area where the next nearest school was about 40 miles away, so we had no other school choice. Story 15. At university, my professor did not tell us the time of our examination, despite numerous emails from 20-odd students as well as the head professor of the course. This exam could have been any time from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., and I lived 90 minutes from campus and relied on crap public transport to get into university. I got to go 9 p.m. the day before the exam, and no one knew when the exam would be, and if we missed it, we would fail the whole module. So I took the train to the city where my university is and booked a cheap, crappy hotel room for the night just to make sure I was there on time. We all took the exam at 12 p.m. after getting an email an hour before the exam was being held, so I wouldn't have made it in time if I stayed at home. The worst part was that no one cared, not the professor, the course lead, or the head of our school. They all just left 30 students in the lurch, allowing them to potentially fail the exam and therefore the module. Story 16. On the last day of school, it is customary, at least in Germany, that you don't do anything and just watch a movie or go to town and eat ice cream. We are a school where you have class from 8 to 16, and we're the state that has summer vacation last. So in the last lesson where we did freaking math, which no one likes, he told us at the end, how does it feel to be the last students doing lessons in the whole of Germany? Story 17. We were about 10 or 11 years old. It was the last period of the day and the music teacher was subbing for our science class. He was sitting at the computer and we were all getting on with our work. Towards the end of the period, our homeroom teacher comes into the classroom and exclaims, "It's the end of the day. Why are you all now packed up?" To which the music teacher replied, "I told them and they refused to." Excuse you? He hadn't said a thing to us, so we all protested. Even so, our homeroom teacher told us off for being disobedient as the music teacher slithered out of the room and we had to stay 10 minutes late as punishment. Lying snake. Story 18. I had a college professor who was teaching history course to a bunch of education majors in their junior year. She would ask us questions all the time about things she hadn't yet lectured on and then pull the, "Really? Does no one know the answer to this? Well, I guess we'll just wait for someone to answer." We were all education majors. We knew that trick. We waited her out every single time. She always broke first. This was a poorly executed attempt at using the Socratic method. It's better to have students arrive at an answer themselves than it is to tell them. However, you have to first create an environment of trust and respect so that students are comfortable enough to risk a wrong answer, and you have to be willing to provide a little bit of scaffolding should no one know. This professor did neither of those things. Story 19. Pretty standard teacher stuff, keeping the whole class in at lunch for something one person had done. It was the fact that the school had very clear behavior punishment policies that teachers and pupils alike understood that pissed us off because she blatantly broke them just to prove a point. Someone's phone went off in class. At that school, at that time, that meant having your phone taken off of you and getting it back at the end of the day. Fair dues. The someone whose phone it was, however, refused to admit it was them, and this pissed the whole class off to begin with. Then the teacher said that we'd all have to come back at lunch. The lesson was after the break, so we had another lesson before lunch. And if we didn't, we'd have an hour's detention after school. Being a goody-goody, I didn't want an hour's detention on my record, so I turned up but did at least start eating my packed lunch and dared her to tell me not to. I'd like to know if she ever chased up the people who didn't turn up. Story 20. In GCSE English, he taught us the wrong novel for almost the entire term. So we'd read this book over and over, answered essays, and remembered and studied every significant narrative meaning. Apparently, none of the faculty heads had checked up on him until about 6 weeks before our exams when they realized all of our work was on a book not even on the syllabus, and all of our time was effectively wasted. So to rectify it, we lost all of our PE lessons, had to stay late after school 3 days a week, and spend 3 out of 5 lunch breaks cram learning the actual book with another teacher. Safe to say our class wasn't happy at all and most parents complained as it could affect our ability to pass the exams. Story 21. Make everyone come to college from 10 to 11:30 to hold presentations, be 45 minutes late, not tell students they aren't allowed to see each other's student presentations and thus make them be at school at 10 without reason, somehow take up to 3 times the amount of allocated time per presentation group, finish at 6 o'clock instead of 11:30, let most of the students fail or just barely passed, in that particular order. Story 22. My work sent me on a 3-day advanced Adobe Illustrator course last April in London. Just before the exam, the tutor said, "Oh, by the way, there may be a few questions on this exam that we haven't talked about. Just do your best." What the actual hell? My work has just paid about £1,000 for this, and his response was that he can't be expected to teach everything. There were about 6 students in the class, and we were all pretty pissed. Story 23. The first day as a new teacher in our school, she came from a private school originally. Asked the class what hyperbole was, and we were all silent as we hadn't heard the term before. She rudely goes, "Oh, I'm sorry, I thought I was teaching a top-set English class." Everyone in the class unanimously agrees after the teacher leaves to go get photocopies to make that teacher's life a living hell. Some students piped up and said she was just as rude as that when talking to her tutor group. Cue the next few weeks of being angels with our original teacher and being the worst class ever with the rude one, plus complaining about the rude teacher to our original one and getting our parents to send in complaints about the rude one. We had her fired by Christmas. Story 24. Various teachers said that gay sex is equivalent to eating dirt, being gay is a choice, people with specific disabilities shouldn't have sex if they can't procreate. If you're born with an extra appendage, that extra appendage is evil. Dogs don't have feelings. Yeah, I went to a Catholic school. Even the students that were Catholic thought those statements were pretty outrageous. Story 25. She yelled at my friend for missing so much class. He was obviously in chemo, he looked like it, and the whole school knew, including faculty, and he said, "I have cancer," and walked out. He died 3 months later of leukemia.